Well, good afternoon everybody. My name is Tom Singfield. I'm a volunteer here at the Brooklands Museum, and I've been helping on the Viscount team ever since this particular aeroplane arrived at Brooklands back in 1990. We have a nice strong team of about 6 or 7 guys, mostly over the retirement age, but we're all fit and strong enough to carry on working and help look after this aeroplane. I myself, for my business, I was an air traffic control officer at Gatwick, and I've been coming here for 30 years, mostly because of this aeroplane, which I had a big connection with, because the name Viscount Stephen Piercey is very important to me. Stephen was my best mate. He was sadly killed in a mid-air collision whilst taking photographs for Flight International magazine. He was the photographer for Flight. And he got killed in this mid-air crash, and British Air Ferries, who were the current owners of this aircraft, decided in his honour to name the aeroplane after him. So he lived in Addlestone, which is just down the road, and his mum and dad were there. His dad actually flew this aeroplane whilst being a pilot for BEA back in the days, and so sadly his dad's not with us, but his mum is 99 and she's still with us, bless her, and she will be coming to see us in the next month when we celebrate a very special anniversary. The first flight of the Viscount was on 16th of July 1948, so that's 75 years coming up very shortly since the first flight, and that was made from Wisley, just down the road. It wasn't flown from Brooklands. They built 75 of the first type of Viscount, the 700 series, here at Brooklands. Before that production line shifted down to Herne at Bournemouth, and then Brooklands concentrated on the Viscount 800 series, of which this is one of them. Altogether, 444 Viscounts of both those marks were made, making it an extremely valuable asset to the UK. We've made a lot of money. We sold them to Canada, the USA. I think they operated in every continent except Antarctica. So it was a good money spinner for Britain and was well liked by everybody who flew in her. Okay, well, the Viscount wasn't or wouldn't have been such a success if it hadn't have been for the engines. All the Viscounts were powered by 4 Rolls-Royce Dart turbines, so they're jet engines with propellers. So that it's still a jet aeroplane, even though it's got propellers stuck on the front of the jet engines. So these are Rolls-Royce Dart RDa.6s. The design is pretty clever actually, because all these front cowlings like open up like flower petals. So you've got 4 petals that open up, so maintenance wise incredibly easy to access the engines to fix them. All the little catches pop open and the bottom one drops down, the top one goes up, and these open to the side. So very useful for maintenance. So we've got 4 of them. Still, these are just dummy engines on this particular aircraft. Right, okay, so let's go inside and have a look inside our Viscount. It's called India Mike, which is the phonetic alphabet for IM. We always call it India Mike. Come on board. And unlike current airliners, this door is relatively small, so you have a duck there because you have to duck. So here we are, right, okay, on board. We've got rearward facing 2 seats, which were used by the cabin crew when they're landing and taking off. So they're still there with their shoulder harnesses as well. And through this tiny little door, we can go into the cockpit, which you can see is pretty much complete. We've got all the instruments, 2 lovely leather seats, and when you see shortly just what this poor machine went through, you'll appreciate that this is a pretty impressive sight. As you see this cockpit, we've got a I've a few lights on. We've got the 3 greens down there. You can see the undercarriage is down and locked, thankfully. In fact, the aeroplane is actually sat on jacks rather than on the tyres, so it's not going to go anywhere. This is the, sorry, I'll get over there. This little handle there, that's your nose wheel steering there. So when you're taxiing in or out, pilot or the co-pilot, that's how he steers it. Turns the nose wheel. Right, the aircraft was delivered to BEA initially. That was the first operator of this aircraft, G-APIM, India Mike. They took delivery in 1958, and this aircraft was actually built here at Brooklands, made its first flight from the runway, which is some of it still over there. So it's very relevant to be here because it made its first flight from Brooklands. Delivered to BEA. It was named after a famous Irish physicist, Robert Boyle. So anybody remembers from school days Boyle's Law, this was its first name, Robert Boyle. So there's something to remember your school physics lessons from. So anyway, we have, since it arrived here, spent a lot of time and effort creating this display area. So you can see we've got some very nice models, ephemera, various bits of photographs, passenger tickets. This, if you can zoom in there, see the threepenny bits there up on that. That was a famous story that when it was doing its first services, the game was, it was so smooth that you could put a threepenny bit on the table in front of you, on the seat in front of you, and so smooth that it wouldn't fall over. So that's the little story behind the threepenny bits there. This picture here is Ray Piercey. Now he's the father of Stephen Piercey, who the aircraft is named after. He was a pilot with BEA, and these are pictures of some of his logbook pages here, and you can see he actually did fly this particular airplane, G-APIM. So very appropriate for him to be around. Sadly no longer with us, but Stephen's mother, Patsy, who's now 99, that's her there as well. She'll be here next month to help us join the celebrations for the 75th anniversary. All this display was a lot of it put together by the friends of Viscount Stephen Piercey. You know, we acquired the models, and thanks to somebody on the previous team, we had all this units made and all the pictures done, so we got a fantastic view here. This was Stephen Piercey. He was aviation enthusiasts will remember, perhaps he started this magazine called Propliner Aviation Magazine, which is still in existence, and he published this. Mad keen on propeller airliners, you know, a Lockheed Constellation was his ideal thing, and he travelled all over the world, wrote articles, took pictures, and was a super smashing guy. So yes, the world's a sadder place without Steve around. He was very, very entertaining. So inside you can see the rear half is all rigged out as British Air Ferries would have had it. When it was first built, with BEA, there would have been a different seating arrangement up the front here. You would have had the seats with a table in between you. So I think you can see it on here. Yeah, there you go. You could sit opposite your friends or another couple, have a game of cards while you're having your cup of tea. So that's the bulkhead there, and you can see the table in between. I don't think you get that anymore, do you? What else have we got in here? We've got a video running so that we've got some genuine Viscount sounds to keep going. And while you're inside, of course, the most obvious thing is the size of the windows. The Viscount and the Vanguard were very famous for having these massive windows. When the Viscount was first built, every single passenger window was designed as an emergency exit. But that obviously got very expensive, and they decided it wasn't really necessary. So now you can see we only have 3 overwing exits used for emergency evacuations, where you can actually pop the window out. So you can see no overhead lockers. These are just a proper hat rack for putting hats on. You never had carry-on baggage in those days. That was all in the hold, so all you had was either a briefcase or a handbag and your trilby hat, and that's what put up in the hat rack. So each person had a proper overhead light and an air vent, so you could, and you've got the old thing to call the hostess to come and bring you a gin and tonic. So yeah, this is all quite advanced there, and you've got speakers above you as well for when the captain gives his welcome aboard speech, and you know, we're flying at 20,000 feet on our way to Berlin, whatever. So yeah, it's all nicely inside here. The seats are all original British Air Ferries ones, and we're very lucky to have sets of covers that we keep them clean and washed, and we rotate the front row of seats because these actually get used by visitors. We allow visitors to sit on this front row, but we don't allow them to go down the back. So these get worn out a bit, so we'll then shuffle them around to keep them rotated so they don't get too worn out. Okay, so going back to the beginning again, 1945 was the Brabazon Committee that some people may remember, and the idea behind that was for the UK to decide how civil aviation would go after the war, what types to build, and how the manufacturers could make offers to the UK. So anyway, various designs were put forward. The Viscount, originally called the Viceroy, believe it or not, when it was first designed, but because India had just gained independence, they didn't think it was very politically correct to call it a Viceroy anymore. So anyway, they changed it to Viscount. So anyway, once it was in service, it was flown all over Europe with British Airways, or BEA as it was in the olden days. The sale, it was very, very common in Europe because you had the likes of Lufthansa, KLM, who else was there? Don't think the Scandinavian, SAS bought them, Scandinavian airline system, they had them. But yeah, the sound of the Rolls-Royce Darts was everywhere, and we love the sound. We've got it on the machine there, but if you remember the sound, some of you might remember back in the USSR by the Beatles. If you listen to the beginning of that, it's a Viscount taking off. Okay, so here we have a schematic of the various colour schemes that this actual aeroplane flew in. So we start off with the British European Airways colours when it was first built, with that name Robert Boyle was carried on the nose. Then the lovely red square BEA colours, which is a favourite among many. Then it carried the Cambrian colours, which is the Welsh national airline with a nice dragon on the tail. And then it flew around for a while with British Airways, and it had the small Cambrian titles on it. You can see coming down the bottom here, it ended up carrying another British titles, but it wasn't the same airline. This was British Airways abandoned carrying the British titles, and British Air Ferries said, oh, we can have that now. So they put British on it. Then in the end, it ended up looking like that. But we've got the colour scheme on at the moment, same as this, which is when it made its first flight with British Air Ferries. So it's not in its last colour scheme. Right, as regards passenger numbers, when it was first in service with BEA, it carried 42 tourist class, which were down the rear of the cabin, and at the front cabin had 16 first class seats. By the time it got to British Air Ferries, many years later, it would carry 76 in an all tourist class. So all the seats all face the front, and British Air Ferries made a lot of money out of their Viscounts. They had a lot of them, and it did them very proud. It was a very reliable and a very welcomed airliner. Okay, so here we are going to take a walk back down to the far end. So walk past the seats. You notice that as the cabin gets narrower, like in some of the modern airlines, as it gradually gets narrower, you haven't got enough room for 5 seats all the way across. So these last few rows were lucky, they've got very comfortable 2 seats either side. There's a nice jigsaw here of a BEA Viscount, which we completed many years ago. This is a British Air Ferries captain. I forget his name, but that's his uniform, and that's his tie with a British Air Ferries Viscount on there. Right, round the corner in the dark there is the toilet. And a cloakroom. So yes, just a single toilet down the back, and not one at the front. And then round the corner here, this was the galley area. So they used to have all the pull-out units with sandwiches and hot food in here, and they used to make the cups of tea. Here's the hot water pots, you know, where you can pour yourself out a cup of coffee. So everybody had their drinks. Right down the back is not very exciting, I'm afraid, but just a very dark hole where we keep various bits of spares and what have you down there tucked away. It's the back door, which was normally it wasn't used by passengers in the day. This was for taking the catering on and off. So normal aircraft parking like this, it'd be the left hand side front door where the passengers would get on and off, perhaps even using the rear door to get on and off. But this side, the right hand side, was always used by the airport vehicles, catering, maintenance, etc, etc. So yeah, with this, if you look out on the window there, you can see over the wing we'll keep the back door open in the summer because it gets a lovely breeze that blows right through. So let me talk about how India Mike ended up at Brooklands, which is a very significant place for it considering its connection with the Piercey family who lived down the road. Anyway, it was in service with British Air Ferries, and it had just had a big maintenance job, and it was parked on the ramp at Southend when this aircraft here, the green one, the Shorts 330, was taxiing out, had a brake failure, and needless to say, no brakes. The poor thing went straight into the nose with the props turning, completely wrecking the port side of the cockpit area. And if you move down there, you can see that's the area that we ended up having to have replaced with brand new skin on it. Must mention one guy who was responsible for the restoration of all this. His name was Mick Bates. He was an engineer. I think here he is, there's Mick, working on this particular aircraft, rebuilding all that nose area. He's sadly no longer with us, but this Viscount would have been still in that mess if it hadn't have been for him putting it all together. That's him there working down in the nose wheel area. Yeah, he was a pretty incredible guy. We couldn't do it without him. And another name I should mention, Andy Lambert, that's a lot of Brooklands people remember and know quite well because he's been volunteering here and helping out lifting stuff for many years. But Andy and the curator back in the days, Julian Temple, were, along with a chap called Roger Hargreaves, they were responsible for getting India Mike allocated as an exhibit at Brooklands. So after this accident, it just hung around at Southend. All the bits were taken off, it's stolen. It was used as a Christmas tree, they call it. So engines off, interior all gone. And eventually it was just sat there as a bare hulk. And then it was offered as an exhibit to Brooklands, thanks to, as I say, to Julian Temple, Andy Lambert, Roger Hargreaves. So anyway, it was dismantled, and in 1990 it became the only Viscount to go underneath the River Thames when it was brought on a low loader from Southend all the way to Brooklands. So it then was moved, and it was originally positioned outside the Wellington hangar, which has now been shifted across and now become the aircraft factory. But originally it was tucked in that corner there, and that's where it was all put together. Wings were put on, engines, props, everything else. And the friends of Viscount Stephen Piercey paid for it to have a respray, so it all got lovely painted in British Air Ferries colours again. And ever since then, the Viscount team here at Brooklands has, under various owners, shall we say, or leaders, we've all put our bit in and made it what it looks like today, which we're very proud of it. We think it's the best thing on show, beats Concorde hands down, but hey, who are we to say? We're just friends of Viscount Stephen Piercey. Copy of the original artwork, and it's been made into a stamp now, and there's other aeroplanes featured that flew into the Channel Islands. So yeah, there's our aeroplane in the correct colours in this really lovely picture, now made into a stamp. I think it came out probably 4 or 5 years ago now with the Jersey Post. Good job, eh? So here we are parked next to India Mike. We have the front fuselage of another Viscount 800. This one was originally delivered to Austrian Airlines, and it ended up being operated by the Royal Aircraft Establishment in the UK, and it was used for radar trials. It had this massive fiberglass belly tank which had the radar inside. You can see where it was fixed underneath there, and it also had these things here. It's called a slipper tank, right? I'll show you one of those in a minute, but that's been here for quite a few years. It was rescued from a scrapyard, so we were quite lucky to have it. It does get opened up. The cockpit is all there, all fantastic, it's all on display. Next door is what we've just finished doing. This is a spare port outer wing from a Viscount 800, and rather than just have it as a display natural metal finish, there is one in the aircraft factory that we restored. It's just got natural grey finish on it. We thought how cool it would be to match it to the nose here, because we've actually got an original slipper tank. Now these are probably pretty rare things. We haven't got just one, we've got another one there, but this was designed to go underneath the wing of the Viscount, one each side, 150 gallons, to give you some extra range. So any aircraft that was on a delivery flight, say, down to Africa, might have slipper tanks fitted. Apparently they were a nightmare. They were absolutely a terrible thing to fit, because you never knew whether they had fuel in or not. So when you came to take it off, it might weigh X ton or no ton. So there was a nightmare to these fittings. But the daft thing is, they caused so much drag, it was hardly worth the effort to stick them on. So very few airlines use them, but we've got a list here with this other slipper tank. This shows you how it fitted round the wing. So yeah, so there's a few airlines there that actually did use them in service. So these were found underneath the strap chamber, and we dug them out and thought, hey, let's make a little display out of these. So this was the first one we did, and then we thought, why not we fit it to the spare wing? So as you can see, that's the underside of the wing facing us there. Yeah, we were very lucky. We found quite a few spare ailerons in our storage container, and with a little bit of hard work and riveting and etc, we managed to get them to fit, and we even found a brand new wingtip, so that was pretty cool. We had the actual tip with the light in it. So that's, we don't think that had been used at all. So that's fitted on, and you can see the little light casing. That's a nice new thing as well. Yeah, the cradle that it sat in, that's been here. That was made specially for a Viscount wing many years ago. So now it's on display, and we're chuffed a bit. So we think it looks pretty cool. And I think as you walk around the corner there, it really stands out.